The Guardians of the Galaxy series is one of, if not the best trilogy in the MCU. It has flawed but extremely likable characters, it's full of heart, and it's chock full of a style that only James Gunn could pull off. But is Volume 3 better than its two predecessors? There's only one way to find out. Before we get started, join me in the comments down below and let me know what your thoughts are on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And also, just as a forewarning, I will be talking about some spoilers throughout my entire review. So if you're not interested in spoilers and you haven't seen the movie yet, feel free to pause the video and come back after you've seen the movie. Trust me, I'll be here. So I want to dive right into what I absolutely loved about this movie. The first thing that comes to mind is this is an incredibly character-driven plot. It really wouldn't have worked if we weren't invested in these characters before this movie. But the good thing is that we've had several projects where we've got to really grow and love these characters. If you would have told me like 6-7 years ago that one of my favorite characters in the MCU was gonna be an actual Racoon, I would have said you'd be out of your darn mind. But here we are. Rocket Raccoon in particular was the main driving force behind this movie, and that was an exceptional decision by James Gunn. I appreciate the fact that we got to further deep dive into his past, and us as the audience had to watch all of the trauma he experienced, which checked a few more boxes as to why Rocket is the way that he is. But even with Rocket being the main focus of the movie, none of the other main characters felt like they were pushed off to the sideline. Ensemble casts in general can make it very hard for you to sympathize with every single character, but I feel like James Gunn in this movie masterfully balances each of the characters with all of their arcs that they've had built up from all the previous movies, and it really didn't feel like any of them were kicked to the curb. You could really feel the love and the care that he poured into these characters that he has had around for, what was it, like a decade now? By James Gunn maintaining what made all of these character arcs special, in turn it makes us feel more emotionally involved in the stakes that are propelling this movie, which in this case it's saving Rocket's life.
I'm done running.
Our emotional connection with Rocket and the rest of the Guardians team is truly what keeps all of us invested in this third movie. Also, every character just plays off of each other so well. It truly felt like how a family dynamic would actually be, because it's not perfect. They fight, they bicker, they argue, but at the end of the day, when it comes to laying down one's life for the other, they don't hesitate. And when you start from the first Guardians movie where they're just basically learning how to just cope with each other, then to Volume 3 where they're fully explored, I just love the sense of camaraderie they all had together. And having this new form of Gamora that we meet in Avengers Endgame, who has no prior connections to the Guardians, also kind of showed what an outsider would see with the rest of the Guardians. And throughout the entire movie, it was kind of like them bringing her into their family again, and she got to see what it's like to witness true love between family members. Another positive that I absolutely did not see coming is the High Evolutionary as the main villain. When I first saw that the High Evolutionary was going to be the main villain, all I could think of was, here we go again, we're going to have another big bombastic villain that's going to be kind of like Ronan in the first movie, where he's just going to be very powerful and very commanding. He's just going to take over the screen and scream and yell and say, "Give me the Guardians!" But oh my gosh, was this an absolute shock.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
I don't think this is controversial to say, but James Gunn gave us a villain in the High Evolutionary that we hated. I've really noticed a trend recently, especially in the MCU, where they're always trying to have these sympathetic villains that, in order to give them something that we can relate to, they have to strip away some of the things that make them evil. So it almost makes you not nearly as invested as you would have been if they were more focused on actually being evil. Because yeah, that's literally the point of being a villain, right? Is being evil.
Well, duh.
Sometimes you don't want a villain that's just misunderstood or nobody understands. You do want a villain who's just gonna chew scenery and absolutely dominate every scene that they're in. And the High Evolutionary was designed to be evil through and through. And I will admit that this character does have more tendencies to be more of a one-note villain, but I think this is one of those situations where it's actually good. We see his motivations. We see how he tortures his test subjects. More on that later. And by the time we reach the climax, we want nothing more than for the Guardians to destroy him. Chukwudi Iwuji gives an absolute terrifying performance as the villain. Normally I don't like screamy villains, but I'll make an exception in this case. For the first half of the movie, he's a lot more cold and just unsettling and unremorseful. And so by the time he does delve into the losing his marbles and screaming and yelling at the end, it's not abrupt. And so you can almost see throughout the movie how he becomes more and more unhinged. So I think that's why I give this version of this villain a pass. The closest comparison I can come up with is Kang the Conqueror. And everyone liked Jonathan Majors as Kang because he was nuanced, but yet also was very emotional and expressive. But I kind of like the High Evolutionary better than Kang when it comes to being a complete villain. I know, I just praised Kang the Conqueror in my Ant-Man review, but this felt different. This High Evolutionary character gave no craps about anybody. He was dead set on his own objectives, and everybody else who was in his way meant nothing to him. And the only reason why he wants Rocket is for his own nefarious purposes of perfecting whatever his idea of the perfect society would be. So it gives him agency, but then it also gives him the ability to just be irredeemable. The cinematography and special effects in this movie were also way more creative than what we were used to with the other MCU projects recently. So far, phases 4 and 5 have just been consistent mediocrity, and I'm happy to announce that that is not the case in Guardians 3. I loved the dynamic camera work. You follow the action with tight and succinct movements, or there are even times where the camera just lingers intensely on a somber or emotional moment. And there was one scene in particular that made my jaw hit the floor. That hallway scene with all of the Guardians fighting together in the finale was pure cinema, and you can never tell me otherwise. It was such an awesome display of each Guardians member using their powers to the fullest extent that they could, and all the while having this incredible feeling of it looking like a one take with the camera dynamically following all of the characters everywhere they went. Oh my gosh, man, it was so awesome. If I were to go into some of the mixed feelings I had about this movie, I would probably start with the relationship between Rocket and the High Evolutionary. Their relationship itself is not the divisive thing that I wanted to mention. In fact, I thought their relationship was the perfect driving force behind the movie. It's more about the darker side of their relationship that may be a little rough for certain audience members. And by that specifically, I mean there are intense, very, very intense moments of animal torture. In fact, I might be wrong. This might be the darkest MCU movie ever made. I mean, it definitely serves the story well. It really helps us bond more with young Rocket and his young friends with him that were being experimented on. But to say that they suffer at the hands of that High Evolutionary would be an extreme understatement. To be honest, it could be a really huge turnoff for certain audience members if they're very sensitive to animal cruelty. I mean, when Baby Rocket's first words after being experimented on are, "hurt," oh my gosh. That's how you know you're gonna be in for a tearjerker. But I will say, it works. The whole relationship between Baby Rocket and the other test subjects is probably the strongest emotional pull in the entire movie. I mean, they're babies. Animal babies, no less. I'm not even gonna lie to y'all when I say I ugly cried at least 3 times in this movie. And that's just a testament to the excellent performances of the actors and James Gunn's stellar direction. To put it in another way, it kind of reminds me of the emotional impacts of Black Panther: Wakanda Forever and Avengers: Endgame. Those movies are not perfect at all, but what they have that some movies don't necessarily have is the emotional baggage that the characters have to fight through throughout the movie. That's exactly how you set these kind of movies apart from the rest of a flock, is by making them groundbreakingly emotional. Another mixed impact that I noticed was that there were some pretty big tonal inconsistencies throughout the film. There were a lot of times where they paired some very deeply disturbing scenes, kind of like the ones that I mentioned earlier, but then right after that scene, you go straight into some kind of joke where it's Drax and Mantis playing off of each other and then riding a bike down Second Earth or Not Earth or whatever the name was, and they're cracking jokes the whole time. And that quick emotional switch was a little off-putting to me. It kind of left me with little time to process what I had just witnessed in the dark emotional scene beforehand. So I'm basically sitting here going, oh my gosh, I can't believe they do that to Rocket. And then right after that, I'm like, I'm supposed to laugh? Like, I want to laugh, but I've got tears streaming down my face, and you're trying to tell me like this is a funny scene, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around what I just watched. These kind of scenes in general definitely made me wish that they worked a little bit more on the pacing, but that kind of comes in line with a James Gunn movie. James Gunn is going to feature his incredible emotional moments, but then he also is going to have non-stop jokes flying through the movie.
And we'll kill anyone who gets in our way.
No, not kill anyone.
Kill a few people.
Kill no people.
Kill one guy, one stupid guy who no one loves.
Now you're just making it sad.
I'd say like 80 to 90% of the jokes still very much landed for me, but when you pair those up with these dark moments, I think that's where it just felt very off-putting. And without going into too much detail about the humor in this movie, if you enjoyed the humor of Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2, you will be just fine. You're gonna have an absolute kick out of this movie. Also, this one may be slightly controversial, but I wanted to also mention the whole talk about James Gunn and the nepotism in his movies, where he likes to have his friends and his wife be in a lot of the stuff that he directs. And believe me, the internet just lights on fire every time we hear about another project that he included his wife in. And yes, I can confirm that his wife is very much in this movie, Granted, it's only in one specific set piece, and also that same set piece includes Nathan Fillion, who's also a very close friend of James Gunn. I would consider it an extended cameo, but it's way longer than you would expect a normal cameo to be. I'll admit, when I saw Nathan Fillion, I definitely got a little bit disconnected out of the moment, just because it was so blatantly like, poof, there he is, and he's gonna be hanging around for a little bit. And they didn't really do much to really give him something memorable to do other than just, it's Nathan Fillion in a James Gunn movie who's playing like a security guard, but there's really no other distinguishable traits other than that. And then James Gunn's wife plays more of another security guard, but she's got a gold face. So that's the extent of it. All in all, I'd say it's considerably harmless. But I could also see how a lot of people didn't appreciate that, and it kind of separated them from really getting immersed in the movie. But ironically, my wife had a good point about this whole nepotism thing. She made the good point that there's actually plenty of actors and directors who do the same thing in Hollywood. Think about it. Sam Raimi loves to have Bruce Campbell in as many movies as he can. Christopher Nolan always loves partnering with Cillian Murphy. I mean, heck, Adam Sandler made an entire career off of partnering up with some of his best friends, Kevin James, Chris Rock, and they all made those, 85 million different comedy movies that all look the same.
Boom. Roasted.
It's literally the exact same thing that James Gunn did. And I honestly don't remember these actors and directors receiving the same amount of hate that James Gunn did. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just what I've noticed. I think what I'm trying to say is that this is not a new concept of directors inserting some of their close family and friends in these movies. And while you may see things differently than how I interpreted it, I really didn't see too much of a problem. Now, jumping back around briefly, I wanted to talk about Adam Warlock. I definitely was surprised that he was used very sparingly in this movie, and it seemed like he was more of a hired hand. In fact, the more I think about it, it was almost like James Gunn was going to prepare Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and he's like, oh crap, I had Adam Warlock in the cocoon in the post-credit scene of Guardians 2. I gotta use him in here somehow. And at first I was a little disappointed with his character utilization. However, I am cool with it if, and this is a big if we get to see more of him in the future, I'm okay with this. Because in this movie, he is an incredibly powerful man baby who got taken out of his cocoon too early and is still learning how to be a functional individual. And I do like that he slowly starts to come around by the end of the movie, but this needs to be the first step in his development and not the last time we see him. So if he is going to be a member of the Guardians going forward, like we saw in the post-credit scene, I would really appreciate it if Marvel actually gives him something to build on and not just make him some one-note dumb character that they've done before in the past. Because Adam Warlock in the comics is a dope character. So basically what I'm trying to say is, you better not screw this up, Marvel. Guardians 3 is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a perfect film. But I do believe that it is a perfect ending for the Guardians as a trilogy. And that's really all I could ask for. I walked out of the theater feeling a sense of closure, which is not something I've felt in a Marvel movie in a long time.
It's been 84 years.
To be honest, I really don't know what the future of the Guardians are going to look like. But I do know that now that Marvel has lost James Gunn to the DCU, he really is going to be sorely missed. Not many MCU directors can match the heart and soul that he brings to his projects, and I would go so far as to say that Marvel losing him to DC might be one of the worst mistakes they've ever made. Now I can talk until I'm blue in the face about all the technical aspects or the character arcs of Guardians of the Galaxy 3 that I loved, but do you know what really made this movie special? Well, I'll tell you. I saw this opening night with my wife and the theater was packed. Not only that, but for the first time in a while, the audience was actually engaged. We even shared a row with a bunch of frat boys that came in, ironically, during the previews. And they were loud and obnoxious and all that stuff, but then the moment the lights went down and the movie started, they were so invested. And it was so funny hearing them respond to things throughout the movie. I heard them sniffling, crying, and getting emotional right next to me. And it was so awesome to just feel that unison again. I mean, the atmosphere in the theater had an electricity that I haven't felt since Avengers Endgame. Black Widow, Shang-Chi, Thor Love and Thunder, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, these are all examples of when my wife and I went to go see these opening nights, the theaters weren't packed, there was no energy. Whenever there was some big audience clap moments, everyone was dead silent. And again, mind you, these are on opening night. This should be an experience, like a classic MCU movie. But man, it just goes to show, Guardians 3, it felt special again. Maybe it was just a flash in the pan or the last flicker of a dying light, but it was still a joy to experience for even just one movie what it felt like to be in the past golden age of MCU movies. But I've rambled on long enough. Have y'all seen Guardians of the Galaxy 3 yet? If not, what are you still doing here? Go buy a ticket ASAP, because I really do think that it'll be worth your time. Also, go ahead and join me in the comment section down below and let me know how you would rank all 3 of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies together. My personal list, I would probably go Guardians 1, Guardians 3, and Guardians 2, if we're going from best to worst. I definitely was not a fan of Guardians 2 for a long time, and I'm still slowly coming around to it, but even when I put it at the bottom of that list, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Guardians of the Galaxy is the best trilogy in the MCU. Better than Captain America, and it's better than Iron Man. And it's definitely better than Thor, and Thor got to have 4 movies. And also, if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to my channel so that you can stay on top of all things Marvel, DC, and Star Wars. I really can't begin to thank all of you for your incredible support. It really does mean so much to me. But with all that out of the way, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.